Welcome back to Evening Plus. We've had some guests here on the show a couple times over the last few months from the Grand Rapids Public Museum talking about this big trip to Paraguay this past summer and investigation they were doing into a complex river system there and how bones are preserved. It's really neat work, and they've brought all of that back here to West Michigan to share it with our community. So I'm joined once more by science curator Dr. Corey Redmond and Director of Education Aaron Korn at the Grand Rapids Public Museum. Guys, this is your third visit here to Evening Plus because this is so cool. There's so much to talk about and touch on. The last time we touched base with you guys, it was a Zoom call while you were down in Paraguay, which thank you so much for coordinating. Probably the furthest distance interview I've ever done before. But now you're back and you have all of this research and content that you gathered. Can we start off? Let's just refresh folks at home with what the purpose of this trip was. Aaron, we can start with you.
Sure. And yeah, thank you for touching base with us before we left.
So cool.
Yeah. We didn't know if we could work it out, but so cool to have a Zoom and have that touch point when we were there. So just a recap, some background on the project. We've been studying future fossils in the Pilcomayo River system in Paraguay. So this is the third year that the museum has been part of this scientific field research, the fourth year of the project overall. So definitely need to shout out our partners. Dr. Jason Moore at the University of New Mexico is sort of the lead researcher on this grant-funded work, co-lead on the project with Corey. So we've got graduate students, undergraduate students in New Mexico who are part of this. We also collaborate with some of our colleagues in Paraguay. So FACEN, a Faculty of Exact and Natural Sciences, is part of the National University in Asunción. They have scientists and researchers part of our crew as well. So we just completed 3 weeks there in July.
Yeah, and we're seeing pictures and video right now that you guys were able to share with us. Definitely take a close look at these because it's so cool. And so, Dr. Redmond, tell me just a little bit about what you guys were studying, or the purpose behind it, and how it connects back to here in Michigan.
Sure. So the reason we're going to Paraguay is they have a specific type of river system on what's called a mega fan. So think of very large landslide, but over hundreds of kilometers and very, very shallow topography, so almost no topography. And so the rivers down there on the megafan, they start off as kind of one big central river, and then as they get farther away from the origin of the fan, they divide into smaller and smaller rivers. And the reason we're going down there is the Pilcomayo megafan is the biggest megafan in the world, and we think that depositional environment, terrestrial river system, is the best modern example of when we find terrestrial fossils in the rock record. So we're going down there and we're basically looking at where do we find bone on that landscape, in what different parts of the river, what kind of shape is the bone in, preservation style, and then how does that help us to develop a model to better understand why we find fossils where we do in the rock record when we're looking at a terrestrial system.
And part of what's so unique that we saw firsthand, we're getting some evidence of, is this is a major depositional environment. Like the amount of sediment that is laid down at these fingers of the fan. So the areas where the river stops and spits out sediment, we have found that there just can be a matter of days that over 5 feet of sediment gets laid down. And so we know that fossilization occurs when an organism's remains get buried quickly, right? So that's better chances that whole skeleton of the animal gets buried fast. That's great chances it's going to make it into the fossil record. And so seeing those massive amounts of sedimentation is pretty cool.
Yeah, that was one of the neat things that we really saw this year. So we go in July because that's the driest time of the year in Paraguay. It's in the middle of their winter. And because our field areas are so remote and the roads can sometimes be really rough, we want to be able to, we can get out there.
Yeah.
And this year they had a particularly wet winter, so there was a lot more vegetation than what we had in years past. But we also there were several spots in our study area on the megafan where we were able to dig down and basically see last year's deposition. And like Aaron said, it was, it was over 5 feet in some places, which is really cool. I mean, you can see the previous land surface when you dig down. You can see the, the grass that was growing there before it was covered
And I mean, in the pictures that you guys sent along that we just played, I mean, the holes you were digging were enough for you guys to, be in them, 5, 6, 7 feet tall, of being in these, big holes that you were digging with your shovels. And you could tell you guys had a lot of, almost looked like protective gear just because the mud was all over you. And it, makes sense from what you're talking about with just how much there was to get through and explore and study and, look at.
Yeah, you're telling us. It's harder to So I love that you mentioned the photos, because a big initiative we're very proud of this last year was that the whole team really focused on education and outreach, sharing our work, showing science in action, and we did that in some really exciting ways. The museum, the GRPM Instagram, I took over for a week and was able to do fun things like show people, what do we pack in our bag for a day? What do we wear? What does our field techniques look like? But also kind of more inspiring things like talking to Dr. Redmond and others. What inspired you to go into science research? What's your favorite part of paleontology research? So that was cool. We did a couple Instagram Live events on the museum's page, as well as the University of New Mexico Honors College. My favorite day was when we invited community members into the theater at the museum in person, and our colleagues were there in the theater. We zoomed in. We got to show kids and families what we were doing. We got to answer their questions live, and that was really, very special.
I'm sure that was awesome. And tell me just a little bit, teaching kids, or at least showing kids, hey, this is a job out there. This is what you guys do every day in some capacity. Why is that so important to be talking to young people about that right now?
I mean, I think really you can't do something unless you see it, right? Or believe in yourself.
And know that that's a job. It's so important.
Yeah, see that option for you, and see a big group, people of all ages, all backgrounds, doing it was a big part of being able to share some of that video and photos. And
yeah, because we have graduate students as part of the project. This year we have 5 new undergrads that just joined the project. So you have everybody, you have people like me and Jason that have been doing it for several decades, and then you have, the undergrads, it was their first time, a lot of them out of the country, and, doing, I mean, it's not simple field work. We're in very rural, remote places, and they did all, they did stellar. They were all champs. But, getting back to your question about, the reason why we wanted to do a big emphasis on kind of, social media and bringing people in the field with us is because, we're always in need of scientists. And I mean, the reason I got into the natural sciences was the field aspect. So to be able to share that with people and to try to maybe potentially inspire future scientists, future generations, it's a great opportunity.
And I'm remembering back to one of our original interviews and talking about, people are hearing, oh, they went to Paraguay and they studied. Obviously, that's very far away from us here in West Michigan, but a lot of what you guys are studying and working on is applicable back here in the United States and back here in our state of Michigan. Can you touch on that just a little bit?
Yeah, so, I mean, we have 2 paleontology exhibits at the museum now. We have the Clapp Family Mastodon that just opened September 5th, and then we have a traveling exhibit, T-Rex in the Family, that's opening October 11th, which relates directly back to the project, right? We're studying the modern to better understand the past.
Yeah, which is just so cool. And we showed you live when the Mastodon was unveiled. I mean, there was a huge crowd there. That was so exciting. Obviously, this additional exhibit that's opening up in just a couple of days, this is what the museum's really highlighting right now, and there's a ton of interest here in our community.
Yeah, it's a real privilege to do this work, participate in this collaborative international research, and be part of advancing the knowledge of the paleontology community. The project team is going to present several sessions and posters at the Global Society of Vertebrate Paleontology Conference.
Wow.
So sharing some preliminary results of the research. And then excitingly, Corey and I are authoring a poster on that education and outreach aspect of what we did. How do you do remote field research and bring your community in? How do you create products that inspire and educate? Because in the paleontology field, that is an important branch, is how do we continue with the next generation, carrying on this work and this research?
And I know you guys have done this trip a couple of times, now over the last couple of years. What does it look like? And if it's too soon to speak on it, that's okay. But what does this look like in the future? Is this something that may happen again next summer in a couple of years? Yeah,
so we currently have grant money from the David P. Jones that funded this year, and it was a 2-year grant, so we have funding for next year. And it's a long-term project. That's our goal. So we're looking at 5 to 10 years in the future. The idea is to get as big of a data set with the modern bone, all the different sub-environments of the river, so we can build a really good, robust model that we can apply to the fossil record.
Very cool.
And I hope to continue wrapping up some of the real takeaways and products in the education world. So to give a teaser about some of that, we have our webpage, grpm.org/Paraguay, where some of those recordings of those live events, pictures, information about the research lives there. But we also took a whole bunch of interviews, videos, footage. So looking at processing that, editing that, telling some stories with that. And then we've started prototyping a hands-on bone program at the museum. We've tested it with a couple groups so far, trying to talk about paleontology, talk about fossils, talk about this real-world research, and also find some creative ways to simulate some of the techniques we're doing in the field with learners. So hope to be able to offer that to more schools and learners very soon. Just doing what the museum does, participating in this research, being part of this work with our curatorial team and our exhibits team, but then the education department pairing of, how can we bring that back into really meaningful education programming?
Yeah, so kids and anyone really can, actually try this out to some degree, because I feel like that's so important for so many folks too. I've got an interest in this, but do I like actually doing this kind of work? Would that be of interest to me?
Absolutely.
Guys, thanks so much. Anything else that I'm missing that you wanted to touch on? I so appreciate you continuing to come back here and talk about this. I think it's fascinating.
Thank you for having us back so often.
Yeah, of course.
This is fantastic. I think Corey said it. I was going to mention it. If people are interested, if people have kids or they themselves are into science and research and paleontology and bones, now's a great time.
Yeah.
Like he said, now's a great time. We have the Clapp Family Mastodon on display, and then October 11th through April 26th, we'll have a Tyrannosaurus exhibit at the museum.
So
Already, you can see a 14-foot long skeleton on our Galleria floor because one of the T-Rexes was too big to even fit in the gallery.
Oh my goodness.
So exciting stuff.
Very cool. Guys, thanks so much for coming back and talking about this. Again, if you'd like to learn more about all of this, as Aaron mentioned, you can head on to the Grand Rapids Public Museum website to continue to learn more about this project. We're going to take a quick break. When we come